Alright, it's -7 outside this morning, and my module says 1. But fool me not, it is actually 5, which is right on target. But my fans are on high right now, so I'm just barely maintaining that 5. And my sensor inside the cluster of bees, right in the heart of the nest, is just about 9. So still too warm. So let's go take a walk down the aisle. I'll use my other temperature probe just to verify these readings. I have my fans a little bit higher just to churn the air a little bit quicker. You know, this outside row never showing me any bearding, and you know why? It's because it's not that there isn't any bees in there. These girls are right full. It's because I have all this open space beside them here, and I'm not creating this. You know, I kind of think of it as being like a grain bin. You have a grain bin full of grain, and within that grain bin, if you have hot spots, tough spots, it'll start to overheat, and it just kind of amplifies itself as the grain starts to overheat. It gets out of control and just explodes, right? And then you have this small little hot spot that'll take out a tremendous amount of grain in that bin, just because it kind of amplifies itself as it keeps getting hotter and hotter. And I see that as what's happening in my shed right now. My shed is probably a little bit too full. It's over capacity, there's no doubt about that. What am I going to do about it other than building more building space for them? But that's what I've planned on doing, and I'm regulating the temperature as best I can with what I have in here going right now. So I'm testing my limits, kind of like the theme of what I do all the time, is just pressing the boundaries and seeing what these bees can actually tolerate, right? A little bit of bee drop on the floor, not a whole lot. But my bees are tucked back in. Well, they'll probably come out and greet me because there's white light off the camera and my breath. You can get a focus here. So that looks a lot better. Well, to a certain extent. 8 degrees in here yet, so I got to pull that temperature down some more. So if I get some cooler weather, they're talking about cool weather moving in by the end of the week, that's going to help me drop the temperature within this shed. And then once I don't have to bring in as much airflow, then we can mix that cool temperature a lot more effectively. Look, this is the bee drop just from yesterday. These are tremendously large hives. I'm actually caught off guard just a little bit about that. You know, even my nukes. My boxes are full. I guess I knew that was coming, but you know, a beekeeper forever pessimistic. You know, my hives are dying, blah, blah, blah. Well, we got to realize sometimes they aren't. Okay, so I was going to verify this temperature, but I had this in my back pocket, so that's not going to help anything. How do I steer it up? I'm not concerned about the CO2. The CO2 is, well, it was reading 1600 yesterday, and outdoor ambient CO2 I think is roughly 500, 600, I don't even know, but not 1600. So the question is, what is our target for CO2? And that's the question for study, and they're finding that the bees actually do better maybe in a little bit of higher CO2 environment. Yeah, so here's 9 degrees. Oh, quiet. How do I shut that up? Just press buttons until it quietens up. Humidity is fairly low. I like to get it up to around that 45%, but you can't do anything about the humidity with such high air flows through the shed. So 9.3 in the middle of my hot spot. So that's a little bit better than 11. That's why they're tucked in a little better too. But I'm going to watch the CO2 level too as this winter is going to proceed into, you know, miserable cold like it always happens, and we're going to be able to bring the temperature down in the shed quite easily through that weather, which will reduce my airflows. And when that happens, I'm looking at CO2 levels now at, you know, nearly, there's 1200 parts per million. This is right from the air intake here. So if I reduced airflow with this substantial amount of bees within my shed, I'm kind of curious in what my actual CO2 levels will be maintained at. We shall see. I gotta get these bees out before they start stinking. I'm going to give you guys just a quick little snapshot on a diagram of exactly what's going on within my shed here. A lot of people are asking my setup and maybe a little bit confused by the sheer simplicity of what I have going on here. And maybe that simplicity is catching me a bit by not being able to provide exactly the conditions that I need within this shed. But my whole objective and my whole strategy throughout my entire beekeeping operation here, well, farming in general, is focus on the basics, focus on the simplicity of those basics, and then bring the complexity in afterwards. And I haven't really needed to add any more complexities to the simplicity of this design and its function until right now. I'm kind of identifying a situation where maybe those aren't doing the job. I need to maybe provide a supplemental action to help with the mixing of the air. One thing that's quite obvious is what I need to do, which I never do, but on these air intakes, I should really have a plenum that takes this air right across the shed and helps mix that fresh air more evenly. And with that, that maybe would help with my hot spot to a certain degree, but I'm still not, you know, I would need, how many plenums would I need? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plenums down the shed, and that's a lot. I could do that. Maybe I should do that. But more so what my situation is just because I might have stacked these rows a little tighter than usual, and maybe it's the airflow that's not getting down and mixing in and through these hives like they should. And because of that, then it's just allowing this heat to build up within pockets. So I have an inconsistent temperature throughout the entire shed. And I want to try to relieve that because it won't, once it gets cooler, it won't matter because I'll be able to pull down the temperature and even out all those inconsistent spots. But when it starts getting warmer, like if we start getting like a 8 to 10 degree day outside that slips through the end of winter like sometimes happens, I don't want like a 20 degree hot spot in this shed. I want to be able to maintain the temperature throughout and, you know, kind of have the ability to hold them through those hot spots. I don't have refrigeration, and I don't have the luxury of excess space, so I'll just have to rest on airflow and mixing. So let me describe this on a diagram for you. As I digress in my attempt to procrastinate from my daily duties of business at hand, let me just quickly provide you a diagram of what's going on within my shed and how I set it up in such a manner and why it's causing me a problem right now. So I'm going to attempt to do this on a sheet of paper. So bear with me. And bear with all my cluttered mess here. The way I manage my wintering room follows much the same as well, my entire philosophy and how I manage my operation is just to focus on the basics and to keep it simple. It's kind of my theme of this entire YouTube video project, is just kind of making do with what I got, right? And capitalizing on it. So my room is, let's just run a diagram here. So it's 45 by 50 and with a 12-foot ceiling in it. So that gives me 2,700 cubic feet space within the shed. And in the shed I have my hives stacked up to the ceiling, 6 high. So I have 4 rows, and then my nuke stacked this way. And then that represents 1,616 colonies. And then I have some custom wintering and over here in the corner. So I'll have roughly 1,750 colonies within this shed. Let's just make it 1,800 colonies for easier math. So if I'm counting 1,800 colonies into 2,700 square feet, gives me about that 15 square feet per hive. And the recommendation for space within a winter shed runs between that 15 to 20 feet squared per hive. So I'm actually right on target for the square footage of my colonies within this building. So what's going on within my shed is I have my air exhaust fans on this side, and that is air out. And then I have my air inlets on this side, which is air in. Okay. My temperature module is here that controls both these fans independently. So this one is my continuous idle. So as the temperature decreases outside and the temperature within the shed decreases because the air being pulled through the shed, this fan here will be turned completely off, and this fan here idles down to an idle speed to provide just a continual flow of air through the shed. So that's just kind of a generalized ballpark for the amount of air I'm pulling through, but it goes down to idle, so there is some air exchange through the shed at all times. And as the temperature increases, this fan first ramps up, and then as the temperature increases a certain threshold, this fan turns on to purge the air. So then I have both these fans. This is an 8-inch and this is a 12-inch fan pulling air through the shed to cool it down. So what's going on is the temperature on the side wall here isn't the same as within the heart of the nest. And just happens this year, these hives are extremely strong, right? So my airflow in kind of follows a pattern like this, because I have a angle here going into my shed, and then I have a series of fans, 10 ceiling fans. There's a 12 ceiling fans, which continuously mix the air in the shed. So as the air comes into the shed like this, and as it's being pulled out and out, the same on this side, out like that, right? The flaw with that is the air is coming in this side of the shed. Going to see a much colder temperature than this side of the shed, just by the way I have the cold air coming in and then mixing across. What I need is a plenum to be able to distribute the air evenly right across the building. So maybe I'll have to invest into that So what's going on right now is because the air is coming in and then mixing right across the shed, my hives here and my air mixing with my ceiling fans isn't mixing the air adequately enough in between the rows, and it's forming a hot spot right in the middle of my shed. And this is being amplified with some very strong colonies within, well, the whole shed, but I do have exceptionally strong colonies here and here, which kind of creates a hot spot right in the middle of the shed. So just by the simple act of the air coming in and mixing across the shed isn't providing the facility to be able to take care of this little hot spot in the center. And as the temperature outside warms and it doesn't, where I'm not able to cool a shed as effectively, this hot spot just kind of grows, and it grows out and kind of feeds on itself. So when it's warm and we can't keep the temperature in the shed colder, the difference between here and here is like 3 degrees, and this, it just gets bigger like that. It's kind of like I was saying in a grain bin, when you have a little hot spot, it just amplifies itself until you actually target it and cool it down. So the very act of putting plenums in here would help distribute the air a lot more effectively, but more so what I need to be able to do is to stir the air in between the rows more effectively. The ceiling fans aren't doing the job. What I'm going to have to do is mix the air down the rows a lot better. I think I'm going to put 3 box fans and blow the air down the floor, just to try to get the air down the floor and then up, just to mix it a little more effectively. And that should put out that hot spot. That should control this a little more effectively, and that should even out. If I can get that air up and moving around in between the rows more effectively, that should help the fans mix the air within the shed, and the temperature on the sidewall here to the temperature to the inside of the shed should then become pretty much the same. As I'm walking through with my little handheld, I'm getting variations of 1 to 2 degrees all over the place, because the air is mixing. That cold air is coming in, and it's, you know, it's not mixing uniform enough and evenly enough. Those plenums would help with that, but you know, this is what I have. This is what I'm running with. Simple box fans, I think, is going to be my solution there. So that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm not complaining about the situation whatsoever. Well, I have some absolutely magnificent looking colonies in this shed right now. It's just a matter of being able to manage those colonies within my facility. So, you know, keeping it simple, as straightforward and basic as I can, using what I have set up here. I think the investment in running just a couple box fans there might help. This is why it's important that when we are managing our operations, we continually assess the conditions within our facilities, and then we are able to more effectively able to adjust our management practice to, you know, target those ideal conditions. And if all the basics are in place, then we can just simply add on to those basics with more complexities. But I'm not really interested in adding a whole lot more complexity. Simply put, those box fans should do what I need to do. The next step I should do is put those plenums down the shed. After that, before I consider refrigeration, I think what I would do is integrate maybe a water misting type strategy to help heat sink and remove the heat through the use of humidity, and see if that provides an effective response. And if not, maybe fall back onto refrigeration and spend the huge amount of money. Just the refrigeration is, well, last time I checked, $75,000, but you know, could be upwards to $100,000 investment here. What for? Well, to protect a $500,000 investment in my shed, but for 3 days of the year, you know. So is that the wisest place to put my money when, you know, I've been managing these bees indoors effectively all these years? It's just these little problems that arise we got to deal with. Just you want to get carried away with dropping a lot of cost. And I'm not about dropping cost. I'm about, you know, pressing the boundaries, making do with the facility we have, low budget, and extract that revenue, put it in my pocket. So, at any rate, interesting stuff. This is what it's all about, managing the bees. This is the exciting part about the business, is just understanding the behavior, watching, assessing their behavior, and responding to target those ideal conditions to be able to, you know, allow them to thrive and just pull out all the brilliance within these hives and extract it, right? This is managing. This is what it's all about. Dropping a check on the table, that's management too, but that's not as interesting. This is what it's all about, just trying to manage these conditions. So I'm going to go off to Canadian Tire now, get myself, I think 3 box fans should be enough, because it's just right here is that hot spot. If I can just get a little bit more air movement there, I think I'm going to be able to zap that hot spot and then even out the rest of the shed more effectively. We'll see.